Welcome. Just a quick reminder, if you're going to the after party later at the Tipsy Bird, drop by the ENSO booth downstairs to get your entry token. But besides that, welcome. And today we have David Cutting, who is going to be giving us some confessions of a software consultant. So help me give David a warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much for the warm welcome. I'm afraid I'm tied to the podium. I'm a terrible wanderer, so I'll try and stay still for a bit. So thank you very much for coming to my talk when there are far more interesting talks going on downstairs. So obviously you're too lazy to wander downstairs. But I'm Dave. Those of you who don't know me, I'm a reader at Queen's University Belfast. And for me, people get confused about what a reader is. For me, it's when you ask to be a professor and they laugh at you and say no. So it's a kind of consolation prize. I have to say that's for me because I used that joke once before and someone in the crowd said, I'm a reader and I'm happy to be, so it's perfectly fine. My primary research area is I'm interested in software engineering. I'm a reformed software engineer, and most of this talk is around how over the years I've done less and less software engineering and more people engineering, because it turns out software is really complicated yet simple. People are really complicated and really complicated. So who knows? But I'm really interested in kind of software process, legacy systems, evolution of software, and increasingly in how we educate and how we transfer knowledge to developers of tomorrow. And I am a fanatical but very lazy software developer as well on the sides. Now, in addition to this, in my years as a software engineer, software educator, software researcher, I've also spent a lot of time wearing a suit. And that is being a consultant, right? And I hate the fact that I wear a suit and I measure my success in a year as how few times I have to tuck my shirt in, polish my head, or wear a tie. So I still do consultancy now, but I'm very lucky I get to pick and choose, and I do it much less formally. And thankfully, Teams means they can only see from here upwards anyway. All right, so it's perfectly fine. And originally, I was very focused on technical roles. Okay, so I took this up years before I came back to education. Then when I was doing my PhD, I was going out doing network installs, creating software, building systems, and I felt this was where my value was. But over the years, what has actually happened is I've been pushed away to that, and I became what I describe as a software midwife. And my cousin is a midwife, very senior midwife. And I realized that there's a lot in common. I'm not involved in the conception of the idea of the project. I'm not involved in any of the fun bits. I've seen it grow up and go on to go to school. I'm involved in the dirty bit of the delivery, right? The bit, the high risk, potentially high reward bit in the middle. I have no long-term stake or investment in most of the projects I work with nowadays, and it is worth pointing out that this talk is very much focused on working with external customers. Okay, so a lot of the issues I'm going to talk about, it's all to do with when you are working with an external customer through contract, through relationship, whatever. We all know if it's internal customers, it's within the organization, everything is peaches and roses. All right, there are no conflicts, there are no issues there. Everyone sings from the same hymn sheet and works together. All right, so that's fine. We've solved that problem. All right, this is around external, and my focus became on getting the team to deliver the project. Okay, now, this is where we sort of mentioned the fact that over the years, I really got into computers because I really hate people, right? That was my primary driver, right? I love programming. It's logical. It's simple. I understand it. There may be an error. It infuriates me, but there is always a reason. There's no such thing as a computer error. People, on the other hand, difficult, awful, right? Change their minds, do all these kind of things, a bit like GPT does nowadays. And unfortunately, or fortunately, during my career, what has happened is I have been pushed more and more into working with people. Okay, so that has been my journey that I've tried to stay away from as much as possible and then kind of be pushed back. And this entire talk, and pretty much every non-technical talk I give, and you can see various ones that I've done over the years, everything could be answered with just one word. And it's so important, I've done a PowerPoint animation of it. So if there's one thing that you take away from this, it turns out the requirements are really important, right? Who knew? Okay, that's the thing. Right, thanks very much, everyone. All right, we'll see you later. Requirements are incredibly, incredibly important, and they are the thing that determines the success of the project ultimately. Now, one of the ways I like to think about people and things in teams is a thing called the reptilian metaphor. I'm not sure if anyone has come across these before, right? But what it attempts to do in a very simplistic way, kind of pop psychology way, is to put people into categories and boxes. And the idea is that on the one hand, we have the toads. Okay, now the toads are developers. These are people, they like dark spaces, right? They like to be fed Diet Coke on a regular basis. They like to avoid. They're very solitary. They occasionally go ribbit, ribbit, or whatever noise it is. That's a frog. I don't know, whatever, right? I haven't researched this talk. Whatever noise toads make. But the idea is they sit in the swamp. They love dark corners, right? And I mean, some of you may be thinking, yeah, that's me, okay? And it certainly was me for a long time. I like coding. It's not like the movies where you're playing rock music on 15 screens. You're sat usually hunched over a laptop somewhere in a dark corner looking at it. And at the other end, we have the business people. And in our reptilian metaphor, and obviously, this is entirely, they are snakes. They eat animals whole. They fall out of trees. They bite you when you walk past. And the thing about this metaphor is I kind of loved it when I came across it. And I thought it was quite rude, really. I mean, most developers, I'd go, yeah, you're toads. And we'd all be like, yeah, we are. I thought business people would be like, hey, you're snakes. They'd find that offensive. I was at a thing once with all these MBA people. MBA people are the kind of people who like to wear ties. And they were like, yeah, we're snakes. That's right. We're the apex predator, right? We're out slithering around. And they loved it. And I thought, right, okay. Fair enough, right? I've misjudged this. But anyway, so you have the toads on the one side. They're the developers. They, are focusing on code. They're focusing on systems. They're focusing on the dark end. You have the snakes on the other side. They're hissing business. They're out. They're selling. They're looking at business developers. And they can't talk to each other. So the reptilian metaphor goes further and puts someone in the middle. And that person is the chameleon. And the chameleon is probably what most of you actually are, whether you like to be or not. The fact that you're here networking with human beings, okay, means that you have that ability to do it, all right? And this is what I became over the years, that you can talk both languages. I can talk to the technical people, sort of. I can talk to the business people, sort of. I can talk enough of both languages that you kind of come together. And when you look at projects, when you're working with groups that are as diverse as this, you have to try and understand the drivers. And over the years, I was involved in more and more projects, and they usually went terribly, terribly wrong. I tried not to take it personally, all right, but it did seem I had the touch of death when I came to any project I was involved with. So I started to try and quantify what are the drivers of these disparate groups. The drivers are the business people who pay the bills and ultimately want the product, and the drivers are the development teams who have to deliver it. So business, snakes, what are their drivers? Cost, okay? Number one, we want it cheap, we want it done reasonably. We don't want to spend any more money. Quality. We want something that is delivered, meets the functional requirements, has longevity, works, okay, does everything we want it to do, and I want it in a timely fashion. I want it delivered reasonably quickly. And this is, for those of you familiar with project management, turns out the iron triangle. The idea you can have something, it's about the requirements, the cost, and the time. You find some way of balancing them and putting it together. On the other hand, we look at the toads and we think, what are their drivers? We ask them, what drives you? So price, the opposite of cost, right? Snakes want to pay as little as possible. Developers want to get paid as much as possible in order to do it, not unreasonably. The resources that they have available, increasingly now we see developers who choose projects or will work on projects based upon, well, what cloud resources can you provide? What is the funding that's actually available for the compute or whatever, or some AI nonsense that I won't delve into here. Their interest in the system. We are currently in a world where, great news for everyone in this room, there is usually more demand than there is supply of developers, which means that you can pick and choose projects that actually interest you. Clarity of vision. Developers don't like it when the business people don't know what they want, changing their minds every 5 minutes, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And finally, quality. So they do want to deliver something that is quality. So finally, woohoo, we have something that is a commonality, the idea of the quality of the product, the completeness of the product being delivered. How do we determine the quality of the product and talk in the language that we want? Well, turns out that it's all to do with requirements. And again, I'll pause for my beautiful PowerPoint animation to complete. 90% of this presentation is just watching this slide and increasingly bounce around as it went. So what we need to do is we need to establish a shared vision, right? We need to find some way to talk about goals, values, outcomes, all that kind of softy, transformational stuff. But when we talk different languages, how do we accomplish that? And for a long time, this was a real struggle for me, is that I ended up being the person who was trying to have two conversations simultaneously, translate and try and drive the change and the values. And believe it or not, I found an answer. And I found an answer in trying to get everyone onto the same page, right? And I assumed initially, wrongly, that we were. I assumed that people would talk. We, the tech people, we talk in tech requirements. Business people don't, they talk in business requirements. The two sound the same, but they're totally different. We might have a shorthand of how we talk about things. In fact, we do have, whether you hate it or love it, things like UML, state charts, diagrams. We have techniques for talking to things ourselves. But it's not all. Sometimes a picture paints 1,000 words. And this is where I actually took an incredibly important lesson from working with designers. Now, as a developer, technical project manager, and I apologise for anyone in the room, I had a hate relationship with designers, not a love-hate relationship. And one day, being paid a day rate somewhere in excess of £600 a day, having travelled to Shoreditch to cram into a pub to pay about £600 for a pint of beer, I sat at a table with a lot of senior people where a designer genuinely talked about product, opened a book and said, I've been finding out if it's more a dolphin or a shark. And I caught the eye of the technical architect opposite, and we desperately tried not to collapse in laughter as the directors sat there and went, that's a really good question. Is this product that has nothing to do with the sea, right? I can't mention what it is, but, is it a dolphin or a shark? We had a long discussion about, is it a dolphin or a shark, right? I still don't know to this day. I think it's a turtle that's caught in a net and has floated to the surface. And anyway, that's another story. But later on in my career, when actually dealing with designers that were actually focused on it, one of the things I noticed was that designers, being naturally very visual people, provide something for immediate feedback. They're not discussing things in words. The brief might come in words. They might talk about this stuff, but good designers say, did you mean this? So this is from a project that's a totally different project years later. You start off with sketches. You put colour on them. Designers start to flesh things out. You end up with a version of it. And it allows your technical users to get a feedback for what's there, what the buttons are going to do. It allows your non-technical directors to actually look at things and do things. Same project, this was my technical prototype I'd created, and I spent months on it, right? I had a back end, I'd written it in the first time in Angular, back end in Laravel, whatever, learned all these new technologies, everything was there. Actually, we got more feedback from these two mock-ups of the design work. So this was all lovely, this was all lots and lots of work, but all we really wanted to do, because the users, the stakeholders, didn't care about me talking about, back-end technical architecture is amazing, right? I've used event-driven architecture, I've done all this. They're like, shut up, Dave, we don't care. What does this button do? When I click this button, where does it go? What colour is that button? So it turns out that design is very useful. So this was a lesson that I took, okay? The lesson that a picture paints 1,000 words. Now, if you work with me on a project, you'll be sick of me drawing pictures, right? Not technical architecture pictures. We get there in the end, all right? But what I'm really interested in, if I'm talking to you as the user, you as the actual business person, you don't understand computers, but you can look at a mock-up of a screen and I can say, well, when you press this, what do you want to happen? That helps us establish a common language. Once we've done that, we are actually able to determine what it is that this action does. Where do these things go? And to me, it's replaced an awful lot of flow charts, state charts, diagrams, all of this. I will mock it up badly with pen and paper in order to go through it. So it becomes very, very useful. All right. So another problem I've discovered, or did discover, Agile. Agile's marvelous, isn't it, right? Agile means we don't have to care about requirements. Agile means we can change our minds. Agile means that the ship can change direction as we go. Agile is the equivalent of the road trip I took when I'd shortly passed my test, which I don't know if everyone does. You drive to the nearest city. We drove to London, and then someone said, let's go to Stonehenge and let's go here. And we ran out of petrol somewhere in Wiltshire because we couldn't make our minds up, and it was pre-GPS. So we were lost. I think the car's still there somewhere on the side of a road. And Agile's great, and I learned it, and I did it. We're developing in teams as Agile people, and this is great, all right? So now what I'm saying to customers when they come in and I'm initiating the project is I'm going, well, you haven't got a complete feature set. It doesn't matter. Agile, right? Agile development means we can develop the specific requirements as the project goes on, okay? It turns out I was completely and utterly wrong, okay? It's the story of my life, right? Wrong about most things, wrong about everything, because in some projects, it's gone too far. So this specific project I'm talking about, it was too agile. The directors felt empowered, so these are the business people that pull in the purse strings, felt empowered to change everything about it at every available opportunity. Okay, so you'd go on a Monday, you'd think you know what you were doing, you'd have a sprint for 2 weeks, the following, so Friday week, you'd then go and say this, and by which point they had spent the 2 weeks literally changing absolutely everything it was going to do. Okay. How the hell do I deal with that? Especially as we'd said to them, Agile will solve this. This is an Agile project. It's there. Hit them where it hurts. Money. Okay, so what I discovered was if I said to them, oh, those are brilliant, you are geniuses, you are visionaries, right? These are great new requirements. It's going to be 2 extra days for us to cost that out. 2 extra charge days? Yes, 2 extra charge days. For the full team? Yes, for the full team. You'd be surprised how quickly that focused their minds. Because 1 or 2 cycles at several £1,000s to change, suddenly you're hitting them on the cost of their iron triangle and they're thinking, no, this is not happening. Okay, so you try and do it. So what was the answer to all of this? Well, it was requirements, all right? And better still, wait for the end of this animation because it's slightly different. I should have made this quicker, shouldn't I? Partially fixed requirements, right? So the trick is to be agile in our teams, be agile in how we allocate resources, allocate, on our backlogs, whatever system it is we're using. Lovely. Don't let the business people know you can be agile. Make them swear in blood and money and gold up front what it is that they want, okay? And then what it is that they want is often entirely unrealistic. So a more recent project I've worked with, and by the way, when I came up with the idea of this talk, I was going to be very honest. It's being recorded, so I'm being careful in terms of what I say, all right? Just so you know, please. All of it, this is entirely fictitious. No normal person is mentioned. A project happens and often you will find, and some of you may have found this, that the drivers in the business believe that software is going to drive the change in their business. Your implementation of your system is going to deliver transformational change to their business. And they're not always wrong, because obviously you're doing it for a reason. You're trying to transform something, you're trying to do something. But if the reason they want the software is because their business process is so complicated that it cannot be fixed, because they don't know how to fix it on paper or the existing system, trying to employ a developer to make something electronic and then expecting an ROI on that time within 3 months, 6 months, 12 months is utterly, utterly unrealistic. And this leads us to cases where halfway through people are bought because they're not seeing immediate value. They're not seeing it come back. They have to understand, and this is a hard conversation I'll have with people on projects, they are investing more than the money that goes into it. They need to put the time in. There's going to be a lead time on this. There's going to be time to adopt it, to come into it. So how do we manage that as we go through it? Well, feedback and reporting. So we need to, presumably, unless we live in an ideal world where people give us the money and then never ever check on what we're doing, we need to continually feed back on what it is we've done, how we are delivering the product, what it is we're spending their money on, because ultimately we are spending their money and hopefully we're spending a lot of it, all right, on these things, because it's great at the end of the day. We're not doing this for our own health. How do we manage that feedback cycle? So again, one of the things I used to think was we would do some development, we hand that back to the customer for feedback, and that's it. The process at that point is paused, right? We're not concurrent, we are a sequential operation. I've done a piece of work, we hand it back as a team, we then wait 2 weeks and we do nothing. Does the customer see it like that? Does the customer assume that because we're waiting for an answer for them, we are just going to sit on our hands and do absolutely nothing? Well, probably not, unless we've agreed that up front, unless we've actually put it in. Also, what is the feedback that we want from the customer, from the user? We need to be as specific as humanly possible. I've been through many, many feedback cycles where we've delivered something and gone, ta-da, here you are, great. Well, could you let us get back to us in a week and tell us? And what I've wanted to know is, does it work? Is it functional? Does it meet your branding guidelines? Is it quick enough? Fundamental questions. And what's come back is a kind of page of A4 about something entirely different than what I've asked for. Maybe they've changed the requirements. Maybe they've done something else. Maybe they fixate on the kerning of the font partway onto it. Because one of the things I have discovered about non-technical directors is they'll say something like, oh, look, would you mind? I'm really sorry, but we need you to change that button to orange. I'm really sorry, we need you to change the button to orange. And you're like, okay. And in the next breath, they go, oh, and would you mind just make it work on Android? It works on my Apple phone. Can you just make it work on Android, please? Oh, but I'm really sorry about the button color change. So you got to come in. What is the actionable feedback? If we don't get feedback that can actually be actioned, if we get a long list of kind of rambling comments or, fundamental things, it can't happen. It can't put things together. We are after having actionable work in order to let things happen. And this is the challenge at the end of the day. We have people that talk a different language. We might try and have someone like me in the middle, all right? But we need to try and work out the positions, the interests, the needs of everyone, building around the quality idea in order to put that in. And as we ramble towards my final thoughts on these things, you'll be pleased to know, okay, because I'm sure there's coffee eventually, we need to communicate. It turns out the thing that I hate the most, talking to people, is the thing we need to do the most. And it may well be the thing that you all hate the most as well. But unless we work out a way of communicating with our customers, who are idiots, I'll take that, who talk a different language, okay? And if you're the project manager talking to the developers, who are idiots, who talk a totally different language, right? I'm the only genius, by the way, in all of this. I sit in the middle, right, okay. How do we find that common language? How do we do it? And we need to be inventive. We need to find a way that works. And as I say, I have personally found that genuinely, this is one of the take homes hopefully from this, is use imagery. Use imagery and metaphor and build things and sketch them out. Don't be afraid to immediately say, I spent a long time with kind of the view, oh, the UI is the last thing, right? Oh no, the technical architecture matters. Okay, let's start with a database, all right? I was an idiot, all right? Still am. UI is the bit that people see. It just finds the function. Yeah, you're right. Okay, worrying about writing the CSS maybe is one of the last things we do. But sketching it out, allowing people to understand how the system will operate, how your users will interface with it, hugely important and obviously very useful. And if we can communicate, then we need to agree. We need to have a common set of requirements. And the requirements are not just the system requirements. The requirements include how do we talk, when do we talk, what's the feedback cycle look, what happens if you change the requirements, what are the built-in penalties, what does it look like. We really need to have a contract that actually defines how we're going to communicate. It's really boring, it goes there. It doesn't have to be a legal thing, but we need to have everything sketched out so that we understand that, so we can work in a framework without falling out with each other. And this all is built around quality. Hopefully we have a shared objective, and that shared objective is to make the system as good as it possibly can be. If it's not good, if it doesn't deliver requirements, we don't like it, we hate working on it. I mean, who's worked on a system that they've hated by the time they finished it? Oh yeah, okay, right, yeah, okay. Who's working now on a system that they think is crap? Yeah, all right, don't worry, you're on camera, I'm afraid. Get his name, yeah, okay. I am, and it's my research system, okay? I've built my own technical debt, right? Who knew? So, we need to look at these, we need to try and do it, we need to try and put quality in. And, ultimately it all comes down to one thing. And that thing is, believe it or not, the requirements, all right, and my amazing PowerPoint animations. So look, thank you very much for listening to me. One of the things, I'll give you a quick shout out. So I'm from Queen's Belfast. I've got a lot of our students here. A lot of our students help run this event. A lot of our students are talking. A lot of our ex-students are all over here. We have a stall downstairs. If you're interested in placement students or want to find out more, Claire and Jonathan, who are much more professional versions of the face of Queen's than me, are downstairs. We'll be happy to help. My socials and everything are on here. Yeah, last night when I was writing these slides, because obviously I do everything at the last minute, I was like, I'm going to do cartoons. It's going to be cool. I asked ChatGPT for a chameleon. I am no longer worried about it taking my job because even I can do a better version than that, all right? But link up with me on there, and we are very, very interested in building research links. You've got an interesting software problem you'd like us to talk about. We're always looking for things and looking for collaborations. And with that, I thank you. And I finished 5 minutes early, which is amazing. So. No, there won't be any questions. It's just I've just ranted for 25 minutes about how they're idiots, everyone's idiots, I'm an idiot. If anyone has any questions, I will happily. No, see at all?
Oh, sorry.
Hello.
Thanks for a great talk. I'm just wondering, you talked a lot about communication and requirements, and it felt very much like you were kind of advocating for writing things down. You were never clear. You did say, obviously, you're talking to customers a lot. Have you embraced the power of demos? What has been your experience around just showing people what you've built?
Yeah.
And instead of saying, what is your feedback? Saying, how is this wrong?
No, okay, no, you're absolutely right. And I apologize that wasn't clear. I mean, my intention there on the feedback cycle was you show them what you've built, you hand it over to them, you look at it. If you've ever tried to get input on an empty page, what you get makes no sense at all. It's always better to have something. And that's why even before we have a system, I like to have a picture of what it might look like, because you get much better actionable feedback. So yes, absolutely, show them the real thing. And maybe they can't run it, maybe they can't use it, but video screenshots is incredibly useful for doing that.
Thank you. This was really fun. My question is, how do you strike a balance, or have you had any techniques to strike a balance between making sure that the customer doesn't feel like an idiot, even though you think they are an idiot, and you're not patronizing, so that you're actually, like, you want them to understand and get their input, but they're just too kind of scared to show that they don't know?
Yeah. So that is a challenge, full stop, because you're looking to validate what they say, you're looking to empower them. Ultimately, they're paying your wages, all right? So many years ago, I worked for Dixon's Group, right? Curry's PC World. It was a soul-destroying experience. You can quote me on that on recording. But one of the few things I learned was a system called GSS, and I use it all the time. Glad, sorry, sure. Right? So they bring something up, even if it makes no sense, is you say, oh, I'm really glad that you brought that up. And I'm really sorry we didn't think about that, or I'm sorry you found that an issue, and I'm sure there's something we can do about it. And some variation of that to try and validate. You want to validate, yes, that's a genuine concern that you put across. Yes, that's realistic. Ultimately, one of the reasons I exist is to insulate the business people from the developers, because the developers, God love them, are not very good at being poker-faced when business people give them what they think are stupid ideas, right? I've been in rooms with people who've been paid lots of money who have rolled their eyes at the senior directors. So I try and avoid that, and I'm very good at going, thank you very, oh no, I mean, that's really interesting. And the other thing I would just say is that when you detract from the technical, because I'm not asking them for their opinion on technical items, that's our job. What I'm asking them for is their opinion on the user interface, the flow, and the operation. And I need to accept, all my jokes aside about, whatever I might say about them, they are actually the experts. It is their business, and they have that, so that we're mimicking their system. So you need to be very good at coming across and saying, yes, that is a genuine point. Thank you for that. Even if inside you're thinking, what? But, poker face.
You talked a bit about sort of how you would sketch things out in those designs. Do you find that it adds value, sort of polishing things up in a sort of design tool like Figma, where you can have more interactivity? Like, is that sort of the stage that you would get to?
Yeah. It's going to depend on the system, okay? And what I would probably say is that what tends to happen is that the initial sketching on whiteboards, where you're in a room, you're doing things and you're taking pictures of it, you then split. So on the one hand, you're starting the technical work. You don't need to wait because you've got some agreement on it. And then the design team begins working on the Figma diagrams or whatever tool you want to use at that point. The difference is I would always be very, very much that those are continually exchanging information. So when a mock-up comes, we want to get the feedback from the user. That feedback is not for the designer. Well, it is for the designer, but it's not just for the designer. The technical team need to be on it because they're updating that goes on. But yes, the more high fidelity your mock-up can be, the better, right? And there are some amazing tools now that let you literally create a fully featured interface. One day we'll put that into ChatGPT, it'll make something better than that, and it will generate it for us.
Hi, Dave.
Hiya.
Thank you for the presentation. Do you have experience working with internal customer, and would you draw parallel to customer?
Yes.
External?
Yes. In many ways, it's a very different experience, isn't it, working with internal customer? Because on the one hand, they're there, you can access them. In theory, you're all working for the same organization, and everyone's getting paid by the same paymaster at the end of the day. But relationships can often be more difficult there because there's hierarchies, there's things putting in. So there are a lot of differences, but nowadays, ultimately the same messages. Make sure that you're clear in your requirements, make sure that you have good communication. And if anything, actually internal customers, and again, I'm not saying anything's easier or harder, but one of the things I would do is meet more often, have them embedded. The more you can actually merge business teams, developers, finance people, you get a better outcome. And some of the companies I've worked with do that, right? So large insurance companies now, the IT department used to be entirely separate. Now there will be a business unit to deliver, I don't know, whatever, right? dog foot insurance or something. And in that unit will be business analysts, directors, commercial people, salespeople, and the dev team. And the closer you can do that, and that's a whole other area of interest, but the better you can do that at your stand-ups, you have stakeholders from everywhere, builds trust, builds relationships, builds all the things, and allows you to deliver something, hopefully.
Great talk, Dave. In terms of demos, would you give some context before presenting it, or would you give it to them kind of blind and just say, what do you think this does? You know, to try and get it to be intuitive.
So if I'm dealing with the directors, right, I would always try and give them context, because unless I'm delivering a completed product that I want feedback from as if you were a new user coming on, which is what user focus groups are for, I don't want them to get hung up on the fact that I didn't realize what it did. I didn't know what it does. I would focus on exactly giving them an intro, telling them what feature this is, what you expect the customer to have done in their journey by that point, and then crack on with what they do. I suppose the exception is if the feedback you want is this obvious and intuitive, then you could, but usually no, I try and give them as much context as possible, because I'm asking them for targeted feedback.
Hi David, kudos on the talk, man. Quick question, your point of view on using DDD to clarify the language and the requirements.
Yeah.
Would you use it in event storming and stuff like that?
Yeah, so design-driven engineering we're talking about? Yeah, okay, because there used to be data-driven engineering, every form of DDE, and then there was various chemicals called DDE that I think probably... I personally have not come across that, but you'll probably find there's nothing new in this world. And if we sat down and I talked about how I was doing it, you'd probably go, you idiot, you're doing 30% of TDE and the rest could help you. I've certainly heard of it, but starting at the design, starting at the phase, making sure you're all playing from the same hymn book, making sure you have the same language, whether that's a visual language or whatever, allows you to develop the requirements. So I absolutely think whatever secret sauce works for you is the way to go. Okay, well, thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.